So welcome everyone to Reflect and Review your co-chair role. I'm Virginia Lorenzi. And I just want to take a moment to tell you how excited I am to see each of you on, because it shows you have a real interest in that. And that is a really wonderful thing, because HL7 has an amazing mission, and your interest in helping carry out that mission is very encouraging to me. So, about me, I work at New York Presbyterian Hospital. I'm also on the faculty at Columbia, and I have been active in HL7 for a while. I've been active in HL7 since 1994. During that time, I've served on many roles. I'm currently co-chair of Patient Empowerment Work Group, and I am a member on several leadership committees, and I am also the prior board secretary. So the learning objective of this particular class is for you to reflect. So I'm looking for you to be able to recall and explain what it means to facilitate as an HL7 co-chair. I want you to be able to identify the steps to prepare your work group for the road ahead. I want you to be able to summarize that work group health stuff and describe how you can have a healthy work group. And I also want you to be able to identify and describe responsibilities and associated tools for facilitating HL7 standards development. And, we just went through a working group meeting, a virtual one, where either hopefully you could all attend, and maybe you were playing a co-chair role in that meeting or a facilitator role, or maybe you were participating and you were watching these co-chair roles, and all of that gives us a chance to reflect. And actually, I'm going to be asking you guys questions, just so you know. So an important thing that happens in HL7 is we make decisions. So here is a true or false question for you, and you could put some answers in the chat. The primary role of a co-chair is to make standards development decisions on behalf of the work group. Who else wants to weigh in here? Hey. A lot of people think it's false, and I would agree with that. No, your job is to be a facilitator. So your job as a co-chair is to support everyone to do their best thinking and practice, so that you can come up with consensus-based decisions. So as a facilitator, and this sometimes is the hardest part of the facilitator role for me, is you have to kind of shut down your own opinions and instead solicit opinions from others. Be quiet, let others speak. And to promote a mutual understanding, cultivate the shared responsibility. And this was from our facilitator class. If you go back to the first class, we talk about this. I'm having trouble pressing buttons. Another true or false. Co-chairs are not allowed to voice their opinion. A lot of people saying false on that. So the problem with a co-chair voicing their opinion, because I agree with you, co-chairs are allowed to voice their opinion. But the problem is when you voice your opinion kind of wearing the co-chair hat, or how you do it, you could stifle the opinions of others. So some things you might want to do is taking off my co-chair hat, I just want to say this. And another thing, I kind of suggest both, is not being the first to say something. Try to get other people to talk first. Because when you're in a leadership role, sometimes people will just defer to what you say. They might not want to go against it. Maybe they are going to say the thing you're going to say, it's better that it comes from someone else besides you, because then you're getting them to engage and participate. So if it's possible, even a little awkward silence to get other people talking, and remember that, you know, in a leadership role, you don't want to stifle that great conversation. I don't know if that's helpful. And if you ever come to one of my meetings and you don't see me doing that, you can remind me to do that. So I love the mute button. Love to be accidentally on mute. So we talked about in the first session, understanding the dynamics of group decision making, about using facilitative listening skills, dealing with difficult dynamics, and using principles for building sustainable agreements. And we talked about divergent thinking. And I wanted to ask what you liked or disliked about divergent thinking. So divergent thinking opinions. And someone said, I wish all co-chairs were required to take this course. Yeah. And I admire everyone who is here, who is kind of working to do the best they can as a co-chair, you know, or you're considering to be a co-chair. And I love the people that have come here who have been a co-chair for a while. I love that. So here we have an answer. I like this. Makes room in your mindset to expand your thought process. I like that. Yeah. So divergent thinking. Anything people don't like about divergent thinking? Okay, so divergent thinking is different ideas. So it's like when you want to get something done and someone says, well, we could do it this other way. And then someone says, we could do it even this other way. And someone says, why don't we just do it this other way? So there can be all, you know, that's the idea of divergent thinking. And Susan said it can take a lot of time. So yes, so the great thing is we hear different views of the elephant. We see different parts of the elephant, but it can take time. Yeah, and that is a problem. It helps with consensus because people buy in. It can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable. And sometimes this is where the fights happen. And it can get, you know, people can get pretty passionate about things that are actually very geeky concepts, like how to model something can become something where people can even get emotional about it. You know, I've seen people get emotional about things. So if you recall from the first class, and I mean, if you didn't go to the first class, I'm trying to get you to watch the recording, just so you know. When you need to get to a point where you have all this great divergent thinking, so you get all the ideas on the table, but then you're going to have to do that hard work of converging, synthesizing, and refining to get to that final solution. So that thing in the middle where you have to pull it back in, they call the groan zone. And literally, you know, sometimes there's groaning, you know, it's not always that easy. I mean, I have fights with myself sometimes, so having to converge with others can be difficult for me. But you do want to watch out for things where people don't share their ideas. They self-censor. They're like, okay, the chairs must know what they're doing, so I'm not going to bring this up, even though the thing they want to bring up was what really needed to be on the table. And that reliance on authority too. So that's why you want to get everyone's opinions. You want to make sure people are talking. I like to get the quiet people talking, because people that are very quiet a lot of times, when they do speak, they've really thought out they've really thought things out. So it's good. And also they might like that you actually care what they have to say. Yeah, these are some of the things that happen in the groan zone. Where people, it's like, it's got to be this way or the highway. So I want to remind everyone about the groan zone and this important thing we do in helping to make decisions, facilitate. So in terms of great HL7 facilitation, I always like to say, have you ever attended a call or a work group and were really impressed by the facilitation? And in fact, if you want to go all out and call out that work group that you think, great answers in the chat. A work group, if you know of a work group where you went and attended and you're like, wow, I saw some great facilitation going on that work group or that meeting, feel free to actually name, because it's good to say nice things behind people's backs. So feel free to name that work group if you'd like, or that group that you saw great facilitation. There we go. DCS and, oh, is that decision? What does DCS stand for? CDS. Okay, good. CDS and CQI. Excellent. So you like the facilitation there. And that's actually, now that you've heard that, CDS and CDI's got a good reference there in terms of being great facilitation. A suggestion I would have, if you want to see it done by the masters, go to one of those meetings and see how it works. Patient administration, very nice. Because I don't think being, when we decide to step up and become a co-chair, it doesn't mean that we are good at everything. And it really helps to be exposed to a working group that is able to really make decisions effectively and has great facilitation. So I would encourage you to attend one of those meetings, and it's Bryn Rhodes, right? So he's head of the TSC now, and I'm watching him work, and it's excellent, and I've watched Floyd work. So great. And I've watched people in patient administration. Yeah. And I guess then the next question is what impressed you? What did they do right? And also Saad and I were talking the other day and got me thinking about my first HL7 meeting and why I decided to keep coming. And I think that's something we always need to remember, is what it was like to be a first timer at HL7. Because the more we get more involved, we have to remember what it's like for the newcomer. So some great answers in the chat. Ability to remain neutral. And just pointing out the considerations that need to be addressed. Driving for clarity, decreased ambiguity. Abdul Malik Shakur, who used to teach our facilitation class, he has since retired, although I noticed he came back to the virtual meeting. I was always impressed with how he facilitated, and if I had something very divergent to say, he was very good at honoring my opinion and helping it be constructive in the conversation, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so someone said, have always felt my opinion was welcomed. And that's important. Even if it's like our opinion, just long, it's important that you hear people and that that people that the co-chairs are providing an opportunity for everyone who is attending their meetings to be heard and their opinion to be honored. While also, being the force that moves things forward. So, and that can be tricky, but that's important. Yeah, we already named great ones. Okay, on the not so great HL7 facilitation, I don't want you naming anybody. Okay, keep it to yourself. You can have your private backroom conversations on it. But I do want to talk about what makes facilitation bad. So if you've ever attended a call or a work group and wish the facilitation was better, one is, has it ever happened to you? And if it happened, what was going wrong? Because none of us want to be running one of those calls. But I've been on calls where I'm in a leadership position and I have felt that it's going wrong, even and in a leadership position. And also we lead as co-leads too. We work as a team with our co-leaders. So it could be sometimes the co-leaders just don't have their teamwork going right, But what was going wrong if you were on this call and you wished it was better? Does anyone have any comments? No naming names or groups. But have you ever had a bad situation? That's a challenging one. So someone said letting one person get too much airtime. So you need to honor people's opinions and you need to allow people to have platforms, but you need to get them off the platform too. And that's a delicate operation. And part of that I've seen people do well, where they'll say, okay, we're going to need to kind of take that offline, or, we have to stick to our agenda items. We have this much time left. And then, and yeah, not including people. You can go to a work group meeting and only 3 people are talking and they're not opening the floor for other people. Someone said strong personalities, and that's a hard thing because the HL7 volunteers come as they are. So the thing is, how do you pull back that personality, or self-awareness enough that in a co-chair team, maybe that person should be the one who's in a role where they're not going to be talking all the time. And someone said qualifying what members contribute. If you tell me I have to do a certain thing, I might feel really inhibited in contributing. And Sadhana, like I said, she and I had this wonderful conversation about newcomers. It is a, excuse me, but it is a damn shame if you've got a newcomer coming into your room, into your work group, and you haven't recognized them, said hello, figured out where they came from, why they're there, not welcome them the second or third time because, you want them to keep coming back, because this could be a really key person in your future work group. So it's important to welcome people. I don't even know what I have next on here. Let's see. And then what could have made it better? I was trying to answer some of that, but a few things, what could make it better? I don't think, for some people, they're just natural facilitators that just do an amazing job. For others, it's not that easy, but everyone can become a better facilitator. And, and again, we work on a work group. we don't want to be sharing these work groups alone because that'd be too much work. We share the load with other honorable volunteers who have stepped up to do this work, right? So we have to figure out how to work together to properly facilitate. And that that's important. And I think we're always kind of in training. And I guess the question is, have any of you had the opportunity to do this? He's going to our work group. The problem, Maria, is just that there is no formal setup that way. I mean, there could be, but interesting. Okay, so quite a few of you have had a chance to facilitate. So you've been in the facilitation shoes. So the question is, how did it feel to facilitate? Especially those who've just started facilitating. How'd that feel? And in the HL7 world. That's wonderful. Someone said good. I like that. Mixed. Very nice, Nicole. And welcome. Welcome, BPM to HL7. Umberto has some good advice. It's good to over-prepare. And I guess a trick to that is we're all doing this. We're finding slices of time to do our HL7 work with everything else we're doing. But it's amazing how preparation really makes a difference in a meeting for facilitation. And it can be even scary. I would agree. It could be scary. I'll say sometimes for me, it feels a little awkward because like with Robert's rules and such. So post answers in chat, we've already covered that. So I guess a question is, when did it feel right? Thomas, you said it felt good. When did it feel right? Like, when do you know it? You got it right? How do we know we've arrived? Beautiful. When people feel open to contributing collectively, everybody's talking, and this is positive contributions. And you feel like, okay, I actually set the table and everyone's enjoying the meal. Because that's what we do. We set the table. We bring people there to share that meal. Good use of time. We accomplished something collectively. We didn't just talk, we actually got something done. When we get work done through consensus, it's like a double checkbox. Even better, after a lively discussion. So not only did we reach consensus, but we had our divergent thinking and we still got there. And we all felt like we got there. It's not just one person. So this is all we're shooting for. And then there's the unnatural, awkward part. If people want to answer, what am I doing for time? Now I've learned in my kind of wearing my education hat that taking time to reflect is an important part of learning. So it's good that you take time and just reflect on what works, what doesn't work, what something actually means. They have people reflecting in math class. I found that kind of interesting. And another question, when did it feel wrong? God, long silences during a call. Yeah, although people have suggested some silence is okay, like you just shut up and allow there to be some silence, and other people will need to fill that silence. That can be a way to get people to talk. Yeah. And Michelle, when it comes to people dominating the conversation, sometimes I feel like I'm dominating the conversation when I shouldn't be. And I'm just like, shut up, Virginia. Uh, um, kind of self-regulation there. But yeah, it it's really important that we make sure that people are being heard, that there's multiple people, that people who haven't spoken before get a chance to speak. And then if you have any specific challenges that you have faced facilitating a meeting and you want to bring that out, that we can talk about, feel free to put that in the chat. And the other thing too, as I want to recommend is to become a better facilitator, reach out to other great facilitators. I have some other advice on who you can reach out to for help that's coming up. Yeah. And I agree with you, Sonia, that sometimes people don't mind if some domination is happening. Sometimes people don't mind that, you know, so long as everyone feels like if they wanted to talk, they could. Um, and 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 that's an interesting one. Just trying to get participation and having people want to be involved. So if anyone ideas on how to get people involved, I think in a call, you can sometimes call out people, but ideally you even want them to volunteer and take on homework, right? So, and I do think there's something about just working together as an effective team as co-chairs. I think that's been in my head recently, just thinking about that, like how do we all work together? Because, you know, like I'm in PE and like Maria said, well, we're all co-leaders, um, and it's, and we do okay, but and all of us are trying to balance a bunch of different things. And you just said uneven co-chair workload. And sometimes one co-chair is just really can't put the time in or whatever. And then the other one might feel like overburdened. So figuring that out is a part of the dynamic, is not just how we're running things, but how we're doing it as a team. Okay, so, oh, Michelle, go ahead. Is Sadhana, is Michelle like muted or something? Michelle, if you raise your hand, I can't hear you if you're talking. Okay. You want to put in the chat, but I'm going to switch topics a little. And I got a little challenge for you. Who can vote? It's a very different topic. Who can vote? Who can vote in an HL7 working group call or working group meeting? So if you walk in the room in a working group meeting, you join a work group call, what do you have to be able to vote? So I would agree, anyone present except the chair. A little technicality that Susan said is registered attendees. So if it's a working group meeting, yeah, you can't even get in the room unless you're a registered attendee, so that you are right. But if it's a work group call, anyone who joins the call can vote, minus the chair. And someone asked how many work groups meet beforehand to put together an agenda for meetings. So it is not uncommon for co-chairs to have a meeting to plan a planning meeting of just the co-chairs to plan what they're going to do. And more mature work groups do that. So, and it's a real smart idea. And also to develop that being a team helps you be a team. So who can vote on a ballot? Joel says voting members of HL7. Well, that's certainly true. Voting members of HL7 can vote. Those who sign up for the ballot pool, but to be able to sign up for a ballot pool. To be able to sign up for a ballot pool, you either need to be a member of HL7, which could include being a member through an affiliate, one of the voting members from an affiliate, or you or registered voting members on a corporate membership, or an individual member, or you can pay to participate in a particular ballot. So anyone can actually vote, but you also have to be in the ballot pool before you can vote in a ballot. And that's tricky because, right, you have to sign up for the ballot pool 1 month, and then the next month is the ballot. So when when the ballot's open, it's too late to sign up. See? So you have to kind of be proactive. And if you know someone's coming to ballot, you really have to sign up a month in advance. Who can vote for a board member? Board members are HL7 members. There are international council representatives on the board, and those are they're affiliate representative members on the board, and those are voted in by the International Council. But otherwise, any member of HL7 can vote for the board. Who can vote for a co-chair? Right. Work group members can vote for a co-chair. But how do they know who's a member of a work group? You know, the problem with this is I am talking to the chat, and so this must be very bad if it's recording. So the way you would, I think I'm saying everything out loud. So the way you would vote in a work group is you need to be signed on the email list server. You don't need to be an HL7 member. You just need to be signed up on the list server for a particular work group to be able to vote for a co-chair and to be considered a participant in that work group. HL7 has rules for decision-making, official rules for decision-making, besides just, our work in facilitating. We have to have a quorum. We have to have, and we're going to talk about these things, quorum, preponderance, co-chair as a voter, and rules for decision-making. First thing is quorum for work groups. The default, we have this thing called decision-making practices. So there's a decision-making practices document that's a general document for all of HL7. And every work group is asked to take that decision-making practices, and there's a few places each work group can tweak it to make it their own, which includes changing the quorum, but you can't make the quorum less. You can make it, more if you want. So it tells you what you can change, but every work group will follow their own version of that decision-making practices. But the default is 3, including a chair, and that's a pretty small quorum, but that's the quorum. So in the decision-making practices, it will tell you how for any call, any official work group call, project call, working group meeting, and even e-voting, you would follow what's in your DMP. One thing that we need to make sure we avoid is a preponderance of influence. So this is one organization representing more than 50% of the voting group group members in session. So, if you have a vote and you realize you've got that preponderance of influence, that the vote was really won because there were a whole bunch of people that came in from one company, that could be problematic in your votes. The presiding co-chair can only vote to break a tie or a preponderance of influence. And there's a default to the decision-making practices document, and that is Robert's Rules of Order. Let's talk a little bit about doing project work. Question, if you started a project, you wanted to start a project today, you really wanted to start a project in HL7, what is the first thing you need to do? To get a project started in HL7? Correct. You need a project proposal. It's this little mini form where you just write your idea, and that idea goes out to all of the co-chairs of all the work groups, and they have time to comment on it. Hey, I'd like to be a co-sponsor. Hey, we're doing something like that in our group. Have you thought of this? I'd like to be an interested party. Wow, I'd like to sponsor this. Can you give me more information on this? It's a really great way for everyone to know what work other people might be doing, making sure we're not reinventing the wheel. So it starts with a project proposal. I've seen projects that they come to HL7 like fully developed. That's, if you do that, then you might really have to kind of start over. You could do that. But, it might be smarter to start with that project proposal and go from there. And then the question is, do you always need a project scope statement? You have a project proposal, and then, that's accepted, and then you go to the project scope statement. But do you always need a project scope statement? I'm playing a slow video game. We've got a yes. So one is to do project work in HL7. And I would say it's yes, but there is sometimes work we might do where we don't have a project scope statement. We might be part of another project. I mean, that has happened with upgrading Fire to the new version. It may be that we are doing just, I don't know, your SWOT as a work group. Like you could still, like where you don't need to go through the HL7 technical steering committee for a scope statement, because it's kind of just, maybe it's, you would consider it a project that's work your group has to do with a start and an end date, but it's not like you're not putting out a specification. And then I guess the question is, how does a work group even get project work? And one way is it could be work group sourced. So someone in the work group is like, hey, I want to go do this project. What do you guys think? Any other ways work groups get projects? Let's see. Must be another answer in here. Or an external source could ask for sponsorship or co-sponsorship. Or, like one of those proposals comes along, you're like, wow, that looks a lot like what our work group is interested in. Yeah, review a proposal and choose to be part of it. And certainly a part of that sometimes is coming from the accelerators. There's a lot of work that the ideas come through the accelerators. And then, if you started a project today on February 13th, when could you go to ballot? What's the earliest you could go to ballot? Well, let's see what this person said. September or January. Yeah, I think that's correct. So after a project proposal, you need to draft a PSS. Then that's got to go through the review process and get approved. And if it's a fire IG, you're also going to need to make sure you go through at least one connect-a-thon. And you're going to need a fire implementation guide proposal as well. And when you want to go to ballot, you're going to need that notice of intent to ballot. And then I wondered if you guys even know what ballot reconciliation is. So what is ballot reconciliation? So Brian says resolving the JIRA requests from the ballot feedback, resolving any negatives through ticket resolution or asking for withdrawals. So we're going to take that to a higher level because those are both technically very correct answers. When you put out your ballot document, your draft spec, people looked at it, reviewed it, and provided recommendations on how to improve it. They could have had those as affirmative comments, but they could also have negative comments where they feel especially strong and say, really, to move forward, I feel this needs to be changed. And then they'll tell you what you should change it to. You want affirmative, you could also provide comments on what you think people as a suggestion they should change it to. So ballot reconciliation means working that and then working with the people that voted negative to, say, this is how we were going, we've gone through your particular concerns, and this is how we're proposing to resolve it, and asking them to remove their negative. You know, and you may just say, look, we've talked about in the group and we really don't think this makes sense, and explain why. It might be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and they withdraw it. Or you might be like, we love your idea. We've taken exactly what you said. You might be like, well, we've taken some of the idea, but we've also incorporated it in over here. And all of those things, you just want to work with people so they are able to withdraw their negatives. So more on leading an HL7 work group. We kind of talked about this before. But what do work groups do in addition to project work? They welcome newcomers. They cultivate community. And a lot of things that we say is a concern, right? You know, to build community, we kind of got to get rid of the I, right? And go for the we. They provide expertise. You know, work groups are counted on for their expertise. And we go to other work groups because they're the expert at that, whatever it is. Work groups work together. So it's important that a work group not stand in isolation. A work group exists to collaborate with the other work groups and external parties as well. And in general, you are part of the greater HL7 community. You're trying to help HL7 move forward in general. So to create that environment at HL7, both in our working group meetings and in our hallways and our bigger meetings, HL7 and its participants are committed to a harassment-free environment for everyone. We actually have a code of conduct, and this is the soundbite from that code of conduct. But as co-chairs, you should be role modeling this and really trying to safeguard this harassment-free environment, a safe space for people to be creative and develop standards. And the other thing is that, you know, what's really cool about HL7 is all these people that their organizations compete in the real world, or, you know, it's all about being a customer and maybe customer and vendor or whatever it is. But we don't worry about that at HL7. At HL7, we're all just working together for the greater good. So we have this antitrust policy, and something that you're expected to do as a co-chair is to remind the work group about our antitrust policy. About the harassment-free environment, in addition to this policy, if you want to know more about how to do that and what we're expected to do, there was a class that was at the during the January working group meeting. So if you guys were able to attend on Hoover, you can find it was one of those lunchtime meetings. So if you didn't go to, you can go and listen to the webinar. How do people learn about your work group? Hopefully there are people leaving your work group and running to tell others how wonderful it is. One way people will learn about your work group is from Confluence, which is why, because that's our main workspace, right? That's why it's important for people not to come to your site and find stuff that's 3 years old. Yeah, and nothing that's current. That would be a problem. They can find stuff 3 years old, but they got to see current stuff. And they got to see your mission and your charter, your SWOT, what projects you're working on, who's in charge and how to reach them, and your decision-making practices. And of course, all your agendas and minutes. And then how can you engage your community? You've got people that are involved. Well, if you go to hl7.org, you want to make sure that people have your meeting, you have to schedule your meeting on hl7.org, but, you know, suggest people grab the meeting invite from there and add it to their calendar. And make sure people have gotten Confluence logins, HL7 logins, and suggest that on Confluence they watch your page and tree on Confluence. Suggest that they sign up to chat.fire.org and watch your chat, and that they sign up for your list server, which will have meeting reminders and shows they are official participants of the group. And I mentioned before that, one of the roles of a co-chair is not just taking care of your work group, but it's also outward facing. So you represent your work group to the greater HL7 community, to the technical steering committee. You come to the technical steering committee dinner. You meet with your work group representatives, and there will be calls every once in a while. That's for the technical steering committee to meet with all work group co-chairs. There'll be Zoom calls. You're really encouraged to go to those. At least send one co-chair to those. I think those are the monthly webinars. You're going to co-sponsor projects. You're going to be an interested party on projects. You're going to participate and host joint meetings, and encourage that participation. You're going to review project proposals and project scope statements. This is why it's really important that you pay attention to the co-chair email list server, because there are things that co-chairs need to take care of. Sometimes it's that. It could also be to review maybe a public policy, maybe a new proposed rule that they're asking for comments to from some government. Maybe it's like right now, co-chairs were asked to work with their work groups to provide comments on HL7's strategic plan. So it could be other things beyond the project scope statements. My Zoom window is getting in my way. There you go. We need to make sure we're using terminology right as a greater organization. So reviewing unified terminology governance proposals, because they kind of watch what we're doing from a terminology perspective. And I mentioned before, a request from the Policy Advisory Committee. So I got another true and false question for you on that, representing your work group. As a co-chair of an HL7 work group, I am encouraged and authorized to speak on behalf of HL7 on subjects which my work group is an expert on. True or false? Oh, Brian, that sounds like a message I got on my PC the other day. Not authorized. This is an important question. So if you're not aware, it's really important that you're aware that there is a manual that represents the governance and operations of HL7, and it is called the Governance and Operations Manual, or we like to call it the GOM. I would recommend you read it. If you read it right before bed, it might put you to sleep. I don't know, or get you excited, depending on, if you get really into those geeky documents. But I do suggest you read it. And there is a policy on this. So any written or oral statement presented as an HL7 position by an individual other than HL7 CEO, CSDO, CSIO, or chair, and by HL7 chair, we mean the board chair, must be reviewed prior to its release per the written and oral communications policies that follow. So the written communications have to be reviewed by the work group co-chairs and the Policy Advisory Committee and approved by the HL7 Executive Committee. And oral communications must be endorsed by the work group co-chairs and the HL7 Executive Committee. So the answer is, well, you can, but you got to go through this. So be careful that you don't find yourself representing HL7. You can represent yourself. You can say you're part of the work group. You can say you're a co-chair on it, but you have to make sure that it's coming from you. Otherwise, you need to go through this process. I already nagged you to check your co-chair email, but if you didn't hear me, check your co-chair email. There's time-based things on that. You're going to miss the monthly webinar, or you're not going to respond to a scope statement in time if you don't check there. So here's a question. What co-chair admin work shows transparency and encourages participation in work group work? No. Did you know this was going to be a test? Yeah, making that agenda and that minutes, very important. Shows transparency. I mean, so does responding to JIRA tickets, as well. But we're not just doing meeting times. When are your meetings? That might sound obvious, but it's got to be on the HL7 conference calendar, meeting calendar, which sometimes is annoying, but you need to do it because they expire sometimes. You need to have your agendas posted. And I've heard you should have your agenda posted before 5 seconds before the meeting. Having those agendas posted at least, a couple days in advance gives people a chance to see them, to decide if they want to show up to your meeting or not. Minutes posted, and they need to be approved. There we go, minutes and agenda approved. So when you start a call and you have an agenda, you might ask people, you should ask them, is this agenda okay? Maybe somebody new is joining and they came because they have a specific agenda item. So we need to remember to do that. And the other thing is, work groups do not exist to just exist. We don't need too many work groups, right? We need just enough work groups. So if you're a work group, you want to make sure that you are holding regular meetings, that you're attending the working group meeting, which means our triannual coming together of all the work groups, which we just did virtually in January, and we're going to be doing in person in Madrid in May. If you have work groups, but you never actually go to a working group meeting, then you're not doing what a work group needs to do. If you're not holding regular calls, and every group should have at least one call a week that is like the checking in of that work group. But I would expect a lot project calls and other calls. I mean, patient care. They tell you if you're ever lonely at 5 p.m. Eastern, we have a call Monday through Friday. So there are a lot of calls that one particular work group, any one particular work group might be having in HL7. You should be sponsoring projects. You should be co-sponsoring projects. You should not only be doing that, but you should be completing projects. You should be progressing a ballot all the way through to publication. A spec, an idea, a draft, to ballot, to publication. And you should be participating in that greater community of all the work groups. So if you're doing all that, then in HL7 land, we'd call you healthy. A healthy HL7 work group is thriving. It's got those projects and meetings and ballots, but it's also welcoming and it's transparent, which means meetings, mission, materials are posted and current, and it gets things done in a timely manner. So, and HL7 will tell you if it thinks you're healthy or not by giving you a gold star if it thinks you're healthy. And if you don't get a gold star, then that means they don't think you're as healthy. And it really means that it's a chance for kind of leadership to kind of reach out and say, hey, what can we do to help you? Because it looks like you've got a cold. And I'm proud that I'm part of a work group that got a gold star, but sometimes we don't get gold stars. So it's good to understand what these metrics are. And you'll see these metrics all have to do with making sure you have a pulse and making sure you're being transparent. Do you have minutes posted? Do you have meetings scheduled? Do you have an up-to-date mission and charter? Do you have a SWOT? Are your projects progressing? Are you following up on JIRA? You should always be checking JIRA as well. That people are not putting JIRA tickets against stuff that your work group owns. Here's a key to some of these things up here. About JIRA, they call it the idling JIRA, right? This means you got JIRA issues that are They're sitting out there, but you're not dealing with it. That's a problem. Then you'll lose your gold star if you got idling JIRAs. You got to make sure you touch your JIRAs and keep them up to date because that's part of transparency. And now the working group meeting in January is over. Sometimes it's like, oh, thank goodness, you know, or I'm so sad it's over. You know, not thank goodness, but and now I got to do all my regular work. And our work group has to do all this stuff we're all excited and charged up to do for the next 3 months. You know, and then we'll go to the next meeting. But frankly, there's 2 things you need to do before before you do those things. You need to make sure that your minutes and attendance are posted from the working group meeting. You need to make sure that all your conference calls are scheduled for your next trimester because sometimes those calls disappear. So make sure that you've got all those meetings scheduled. But you're going to have to plan for the next working group meeting. We're expected to book rooms really early. So, and you know, part of that includes asking other groups if they want to join with us. So, and you know, the reason why that has to be early is because for most of our working meetings, they're in person, and there's a lot of room booking and management that HO7 headquarters has to do. So we're going to be asked very soon, you know, to have figured out our agenda for May. Hey, other work group chair, we're going to have to do that. May is a little tricky just because, you know, May is in Madrid. So if, you know, you need to make sure, you know, if you have people in your work group that are going to Madrid and how you're going to run things. By the way, you are allowed to have an interim co-chair. At any point, you can, as a work group, you can have an interim co-chair, and that can be the interim co-chair without an ending point, or you could say, this is the interim co-chair just for this working group meeting, which is a way your work group could potentially get to Madrid if some of your co-chairs can't go. So here are some planning considerations for you to think of right now. Do you want to participate in the May Connect-a-thon? Do you want to participate in the May working group meeting? Do you want to participate in the May ballot? Do you want to start a new project? And of course, HL7 calendars are really useful in figuring this out. I spend a lot of time looking at the calendar link. And I just want to give you a few tips and tricks, weird little tips and tricks. And then we'll just chat, okay? I'm just going to check the chat and see if I missed anything. Okay. A couple people are dropping, but we have this till 4:30, Sadhana, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
So little tips and tricks. And if you guys have tips and tricks, sort of like how to hack code sharing, please bring them in. Yeah. The magical login button on Confluence. And you know, maybe you don't have a problem with this, but sometimes I have been on Confluence and I've forgotten to log in and nothing works right. You can't fill in the attendance form right. I can't edit. I don't know what's going on. And someone's like, you idiot, you're not logged in. So like, sure that you're logged into Confluence. There's a lot of magical things under the 3 little dots. So wherever the 3 little dots are, look at this. This is where you can do things like copy to, you know, and, you know, duplicate things to just save time. Templates, all sorts of great things are hidden under 3 dots. And then, you know, Josh Procious on the HL7 staff knows everything about Confluence. You know, you just have no clue, can't figure it out. You reach out to Josh. The HL7 website. We don't spend a lot of time on the HL7 website. But there are little things there just for co-chairs. But you're not going to get it unless you log in. So first, make sure you're logged in. Again, it's like one of those things like why can't I get this? Oh, I'm not logged in. Then you go to resources and you pick your work group and you click on utilities. And there's a special stuff there just for you as a co-chair. That's where you can find your Zoom login credentials. That's where you can find the Project Insight login credentials, which is how projects are tracked. There's also this neat feature where it says email the co-chairs of a work group. And you can kind of do this for any work group on HL7. And I don't know if this is on, this might not, I don't think this is on utilities. I think this is under work group leadership. Anytime you go to work group leadership on HL7, it'll say email work group co-chairs. Or maybe it's also, I think it's also in utilities. And the reason why this is really good is when you're dealing with a work group like orders and observations or patient care, where I don't know, they have 53 co-chairs. I'm exaggerating. You're going to want a nice handy email list so you can invite them to something or ask them a question. So you can pull that email list of the co-chairs. It's right on the HL7 website. And then, kind of get to know that conference call tool. One, you have to log in. You go to events, conference calls, you can add calls, you can cancel calls. Pay attention to what you're doing because it can be a pain in the neck when you get it wrong. So just do it carefully. Because you can't really edit it. Now you can cancel and you have to put it back in again. There's a feature that you can see all the calls by work group, and that's nice. I like to look down that list. I like to see what my work group has, and then like, oh, that doesn't look good. And that is a quick way that I can see that my work group has the calls it's supposed to have listed or it doesn't. And sometimes it has the same call listed 5 times, and then one of us must have done something wrong. But calls will automatically expire, so you have to go back and re-add them. And this is important because this is how, we're public facing, we're transparent by having our calls listed there. You can also put the call information on your Confluence page. But you need to have it on the HL7 calendar. And then Zolov chat one again, we have to log in. And if you use question mark, you get all sorts of keyboard shortcuts to help you manage and not get overwhelmed by chat.fire.org. And it even has a way to get to the end of the stream, because if you haven't logged on to chat.fire.org for a while, you might find it. A lot has happened in, I don't know, the hour since you were last on. This might be the end of my tips. Let's see. No, really important here. You are not in this alone. Co-chairs have a team, and planning meetings are a really good idea. You also can have more leaders, not just the co-chairs. The more people to lead different parts of things, the better. Project facilitators, project leads for all your projects, co-project leads, vocabulary facilitator, publishing facilitator, and this is also part of how we get people involved. And there are those people that are happy to take those roles, but don't want to be a co-chair. So it gives them a way that they can participate and lead without having to take on the co-chair responsibility. So get them doing that. And you can also ask your technical steering committee working group representative for help. And do you know who your work group representative is? Do you know who to call to get that help? Well, here's the answer. Find your work group and find your work group rep. You might want to invite one of them just to a co-chair call, just to break the ice if you don't know them well. You can invite them to one of your working group calls. You can email them any sort of tough question that I couldn't answer. Maybe it's a question and it's right there in the GOM, or it's right there on HL7 Essentials, which everyone should be familiar with the HL7 Essentials part of Confluence. A lot of great information there. But maybe it's like right in front of you, but you missed it, but they can help you. But there are also people who can help you with, how do I handle this difficult facilitation challenge? How do we handle this complex situation we're in with our ballot? And these comments we've gotten, we're not sure what to do. These are seasoned people, and they can take things up to a higher level too, and discuss it as well. So these are really the people you can go to. So find your work group rep and use them to help you. And on my work group, we have Brett McCart as our work group rep, and we've already used him. Good guy, helpful. Who else can you use for help? Well, excuse me for yelling. We have the HL7 staff. And I'll tell you, as soon as you find out what they know how to do well, it's like the thing is with HL7 staff is we don't always notice them when things are going smoothly, because it's like they've set the table, they've kind of put everything in operation. So we don't see a lot of that invisible work they're doing. Right? We know we go to her. But if you look at the other people in staff, there are some really key people out there. Like anything having to do with the ballot, well, that's Lynn. Anne knows a lot about HL7 projects, how to deal with HL7 projects. She really knows about that. A lot of really wise people on here trying to communicate an idea. Well, you want to ask someone who's good at communicating. Well, maybe ask the marketing person in HL7. Pat and Linda are pretty creative, when it comes to policy. Tisha really knows her stuff. Dave also understands all of HL7 projects. Anne knows all of the process stuff in HL7 really well. So, Josh knows the website, and knows a lot of those Confluence and all of those things. So we can go to any of these people for help, and really you can go to any of them, because the great thing with any of them, and all of you probably have met Marianne, if you want to know what room you're going to, you can go to the HL7 table and they'll point to you in what room you're going to. Any of them can help you find whoever else can help you. So I recommend you get to know the HL7 staff and thank them profusely for all they do. Which probably, if you've been around it all, you're already probably in the habit of thanking them, because they're just so helpful. So it's good to know who to call. And that is it for my formal presentation.